basically I'm here to generate a lot of talk from Howard. What should be added, of course, is in Howard, who I've known how many years?
Roughly 8 to 10 years.
8 to 10 years. Howard used to have chronic fatigue. I used to go to his house, as other famous people did, and sit around his bed. Because Howard had been a scientist, then became a magazine editor, saved, radically changed many literary magazines, music magazines, then became a promoter of very famous rock and roll musicians, and then started writing these books. Now, the first 2 books that he wrote, I read and was just stunned. I was amazed. I've got to say, this 3rd book I find extremely stimulating and extremely disturbing, because I'm one of those people who has many questions about capitalism, and Howard addresses and attacks people like me in a way, in a very provocative, unsettling way, which is a great thing to do, right? I'm totally open to the fact that all my ideas about life may be wrong. Howard's ideas may be wrong too, but there's nobody as stimulating as Howard. And I would like to start, because this book, which is promoting the glories and the advantages of capitalism, is, let's face it, nevertheless titled The Genius of the Beast. Now, the beast is a term that different people have used. I remember years ago reading Simone Weil talking about the great beast of society. So, Howard, capitalism is a redeemer in terms of your book. How come you called it The Genius of the Beast?
Very good question. My publisher actually came up with that title, and the beast refers to Western civilization. And the book was originally called Reinventing Capitalism, but it sold the machine. And the basic idea of the book came from the fact that when 9/11 happened, I was stuck in bed, as Richard just explained, and people would come over to my house and they would say, with relish, Western civilization is about to die, and it deserves to. It is the worst civilization in the history of mankind. It has perpetrated more evil and more violence than any other civilization that exists. And something in me rebelled very powerfully against that message, because Richard and I share certain qualities, and among those qualities are we question everything in life. And what Richard was saying is that he appreciates the book because it questions some of his beliefs, even though he still is going to stick with those beliefs, and as a consequence, he's not comfortable with the book. But one way or the other, we're questioners. And this is a society that invites questioning. This is a society that supports questioning. This is a society that supports freedom of speech and diversity and pluralism and all of that kind of stuff. And there is no society on the face of the earth outside of Western civilization, American civilization in particular, that has invited people like you and me to exist. French civilization did that and gave us both a terrific heritage. So it's Western civilization we're talking about. And why do we call it the beast? Well, the beast, as I said, was not the title I chose, but makes a certain amount of sense, because you know that phrase, we know not what we do, from the Bible? Well, we know not what we do. Wordsworth once upon a time said that getting and spending, we laced our powers. And he was so wrong, it's ridiculous. Because over the course of the 7 years in which I had to think out why in the world this civilization was of value and what we can do, I mean, Richard, me, and you, to redeem this civilization, to take it to the next day, I realized that even our consumerism has extraordinary elements that we fail to take for granted. So now, first off, this is a society that allows people like all of you and me and Richard to exist. And that is rare. In China, I have friends who spent time in China, years in China. And they have been so anxious to get out that it's ridiculous. Because the claustrophobia of not being able to speak, the claustrophobia of not being able to oppose those things that they felt were unjust or incorrect, stifled them tremendously. So in the spirit of we know not what we do, if when we are consuming things, when we are buying things like this is a miracle maker. This is a messianic machine. 30 years ago, and there's a great benefit to being 66 years old, which is my age, and one of those benefits is being able to see change over the course of decade after decade after decade. Life was a very different proposition when the phones that we had were nailed to a wall, were attached to a cord. When you walked out of the house and were supposed to meet somebody and you got confused about your directions, or you couldn't find that person in a crowd, you were stuck. You could not grab this device and call the person who's only 10 feet away from you to say, oh, that's you! There are things we take for granted. Being able to talk to Bangkok or Shanghai. A couple of weeks ago, I set up a meeting between Buzz Aldrin and the former president of India, who's a remarkable man, a former engineer, Dr. APJ Kalam. You know how I did it? I did it on Skype. I did it for free. I did it on my laptop. I made my assistant, JP, who's in here someplace, Marin, my assistant and I worked entirely on our laptops, putting this thing together, and I ran the meeting on my laptop. And most of the work that I did, the 4 months of preparation for this meeting, was done while I was sitting in a local cafe, the Tea Lounge, in Park Slope, in Brooklyn, surrounded by people, which made me infinitely happier than the days when I had to do work like this, isolated, in an office. There's a huge difference. Now, little things like this cell phone, and like being able to sit in the Tea Lounge with an entire computer in my lap. In the 1950s, when I was a kid, computers were the size of this building. And we've got one that's more powerful than those in our laps. These are astonishing things, and they're fucking, if you'll excuse the language, they are freaking messianic, because they give us powers that only 30 years ago or 40 years ago we could have dreamed of, but we would have known were absolutely impossible, that they would never materialize in our lifetimes. And they have, and many more will. Now China, which is out to take over as the hegemon of the 21st century, the central power of the 21st century, can do remarkably clever things. China has been doing science for 2,200 years. China has been turning out encyclopedias of things like agriculture for 2,000 years, and medicine for 2,000 years. Science, the major book on Chinese science is 22 volumes long. Leaders book on China. The Chinese are very inventive and ingenious, and they will not cease to buy new goods like the cell phone or like this other device, which I should never have in a bookstore. The Kindle, but it's here. Take my word for it. I've got it. There you go. But this makes books ubiquitous, because this will read books out loud to me. Once upon a time, look, I'm a very depressive person. I had clinical depression for the first 40 or 50 years of my life. And that means when I wandered around in loneliness, I was miserable. Well, I'm no longer ever alone anymore because of the cell phone, because I have this reading books in my ear. Reading books in my ear. I'm taking that information in ways I could not even conceive when I was a child. These are the things that the Western system, whatever you want to call it, does. And there's another thing the Western system does. It encourages a protest. In fact, it has a standing protest industry. It's had a standing protest industry since 1760 in my pouches. Deadly. But at any rate, and no other civilization in the history of the planet has had an existing protest industry. There was a slot for protest in one of the progenitors of the Western system in biblical Israel, and they were called prophets. But the number of people who were prophets was very, very small. And ever since I've been a kid, we've been able to go to peace marches and march against the bomb, or whatever we chose to march against at the time, march against the war in Vietnam. There's been a slot for that. And it's an industrialized slot. It takes advantage of the printing press. It takes advantage of modern technologies. Today, protests are organized by people with cell phones. These are a few of the tiny messianic powers that we give to the civilization. That is not to say the civilization is devoid of problems. It does some horrendous things, but it gives us the power